So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Generative AI Features in Library Resources, a panel discussion about what you need to know. This panel was organized by the ACRL Science and Technology Section's Publisher and Vendor Relations Committee. I'm Kathleen Flynn. I'm one of the co-chairs, and I'll be moderating the panel today. And my co-chair, Eric Proser, will be keeping an eye on the Q&A. And I want to thank the whole committee for the work that they did to put this together. We also want to thank our panelists for joining us. I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute. But first, some logistics. We are recording, and the recording will be added to the YouTube channel for the ACRL Science and Technology section. I've enabled closed captioning, so feel free to hit the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you'd like to see the live transcript. So the plan for today is that each of our panelists will have around 5 minutes to give a presentation and demo an AI tool if they wish to. Then we'll have around 40 minutes of discussion before ending with around 15 minutes of audience Q&A. So the session is scheduled to last an hour and 15 minutes. And feel free to enter questions you have in the Q&A feature as you think of them, and Eric will keep an eye on them. And with that, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves and present. So Denice, you're up first. And I'll stop sharing. You should be able to share your screen if you'd like to.
I think Denice is on mute.
Denice, I think you're muted.
All right, let me start over then. So my name is Denice Lewis. I'm a research instruction librarian at Wake Forest University. I do not work for Cite, but it's one of my favorite AI tools to use. So for those of you who haven't used Cite, typically it's been used in the past from its inception to search for resources. So you can use search terms, key terms, Boolean search string, and look at citation statements to see where a particular resource has been cited in other resources. Or use it to find other papers, be it preprints, academic papers, and there are some book chapters. But one of the neat things with Cite that just came out last year is the Cite Assistant. And the way that you use it is to click on Assistant at the top of the screen. And I've staged this just to make sure that I'm in the 5-minute window. So using the research assistant, you can use it similar to other generative AI tools in that you can ask it a question, a prompt. So in this particular instance, I asked, where are the gaps in dielectrophoresis cell separation research? Now, the one thing about Cite and how it gives you a response is that it'll literally give you a couple of paragraphs with inline citations. You can hover over the link to the inline citation and it'll tell you where it's actually getting the information from. And then also on the right-hand side, you can see the list of references that it has for you for that particular response. And there are different ways that you can actually configure Cite Assistant. So over on the left-hand side, you can click on the assistant settings. You can decide where you want the reference requirement. Do you want to specify the evidence from abstracts or citation statements? You can even change the citation style and decide how many publications to consult, or if there are particular journals that you wanted to utilize, or one of your dashboards, you can do that as well. But one of the neat features of Cite that I definitely want to mention that just came out this week is the ability to actually get that response back rather than as a written response in paragraphs, but more or less in a table. So in this particular instance, I asked Cite to summarize recent research on biofuel production from algae, which is one of the examples that it has. And it actually shows the results as a list of papers, and then from within a summary from within those papers, where the question has actually been answered. And one of the neat things with using the table features, you can actually add a column for it to and actually query the results for additional information to elicit from each paper. So not knowing how much time I have, I will pass my time over to the next presenter.
Thank you,
Hi.
Denise. And it's up. You're up.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Hello, everyone. I'm Ann Bynan from Clarivate, and this will be super quick. I do have this visual aid to start with, just to explain a little bit about our approach at Clarivate. So you might know we have a range of products. We have quite a vast portfolio. And the way we're approaching AI is through building an academic AI platform that underpins all of our resources. So this illustrates that nicely, that at the bottom, we are using third-party LLMs and different technologies in an efficient, kind of unified way, to make this really quick in terms of our innovation, because then we can deploy, the technology to the various products, whether that's Web of Science or ProQuest platform or Primo or Alma, all these different resources. We'll talk about this later, I think, but we do use a RAG architecture, retrieval augmented generation, to ensure that we are taking advantage of the general purpose LLM, but applying it to a controlled corpus of data, whether that's Web of Science or ProQuest, et cetera. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, where there is that firewall between what you're doing in our controlled environment and the LLM. Nothing goes out the door, to the LLM. I'll just show you super briefly the Web of Science Research Assistant. This is not going to do it justice because, we have a couple minutes, but just to give you a taste of this one tool that we've built. This has been out in the market for about 6 months now. And if you're familiar with the Web of Science, it's a discovery and analytics platform for journals, conferences, and books. This is an additional component that you can add to your subscription. It's meant to be conversational, to give you guided tasks, make it super easy for people to engage with the content. Just to point out here, you can search in different languages and get responses in different languages via the LLM, which is really nice. I'm just going to show you understanding a topic as a guided task, but I'll just point out that you do have a history also of everything you've done in here, so you can go back and do, redo things as well. So I'm just going to show you a topic that I've been reading about, human brain organoids. So we can just put that in here, and very quickly, it's going to summarize for me using, using generative AI, this nice overview. It breaks it down into topics and bullets. And, this is actually an interesting topic about creating these synthetic brain tissues that researchers can use to study neurodegenerative diseases. Everything has a reference. So, these are coming from legitimate papers that we've selected for Web of Science core collection. So that's very important that, these aren't hallucinations. These aren't, maybe untrustworthy research articles. It's all, trusted quality content. So anything that's in that summary has a reference, right? And you can look at that. You can link to the full text. You can look at its citations. You can look at its co-citation relationships. There's a lot of analytics in here. So I want to emphasize that this is Gen AI supported, but it also has a lot of other things in it too, to be a true research assistant. So, it goes beyond just the Gen AI. We do also classify citations based on their context that you kind of saw just before. That's part of Web of Science inherently, but we pull it into the research assistant as well. So you can see if something was cited in a sort of positive or negative way, which I think is very useful. And then just very, very briefly, it will follow a line of thought and ask you additional questions, like, do we want to see what are the key advancements in this topic? We can look at a trend in time as analytics. We can look at a topic map that'll show you, topical relationships between papers, and you can drill down and look at all those papers, of course. And you can also see top authors. So, that might be another aspect that you want to dig into. Who are the experts in this area? It'll show you the different topics they work on. You can view their profile to get more information. You can view their co-authors. That's something new we just added. You can also drill down here to kind of explore that further and see their co-authors, so you can kind of iterate on this as well. So I think that's my 5 minutes, so I will stop, but hopefully that gave you a little flavor. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Right on time.
Yep.
Emily, you're next.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks to everyone. Great to be here. I'm Emily Singley. I'm the Vice President of North American Library Relations for Elsevier. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and see if I can bring up my slides really quickly here. So what I want to talk about today is kind of similar to what you just heard, is just give you an overview of what we've been doing around generative AI at Elsevier. And let me just see if I can get this to go into, there we go. Okay. Starting in January of last year, so over a year ago, we launched Scopus AI. So Scopus is our abstracting and indexing database of mostly scientific literature, over 90 million abstracts, which you might be familiar with. Scopus AI has now been out again for over a year, so we've had a lot of great user feedback on it. The blue squares here are a couple screenshots from that product, and it's a, still has the traditional database search, but we've applied the natural language queries and the using a third-party large language model to do some analysis and summarization of that search. I also want to point out that we just recently, this past fall, we started a new feature within Scopus AI called Emerging Themes. And this is really kind of exciting because it's what we heard from researchers as we were developing this product is they, one of their pain points was when they are trying to decide what their next field of research should be and trying to decide where the gaps are in the literature. So this is what that's trying to do, is sort of identify where the gaps are in the literature, and always pointing back to the references and pointing back to the literature, of course. Also in our portfolio, we have Clinical Key AI, has been around for almost a year as well. This is our clinical point of care tool. So for if any of you are in medical settings, hospitals, libraries, medical libraries, that brings conversational patient care to clinicians in hospitals. This was developed in close collaboration with clinicians and utilizes a domain-specific small language model as well as a large language model to really ensure that the information is as accurate as possible. And then Science Direct, which is our full text database of journal content. It's hopefully launching soon. We're kind of still in the development stage here, working very closely with researchers and librarians to explore the possibilities of generative AI over full text. And then thanks to Anne for already discussing RAG. So very similar approach here. You've probably all heard of this already. Retrieval augmented generation is the approach we're using across all of our AI products. So it's really becoming the industry standard for scholarly search tools, in that RAG really grounds the large language model in the search. So there's still a search being performed, bringing back content, and then analyzing that content and doing the summarization or any kind of language translation that you might want based on that content. So that's that. I'm gonna let's see, get out of here and see if I can just show you Scopus AI really quickly. And one thing I wanted to point out about Scopus AI, what you're seeing right here is traditional Scopus. Scopus AI actually sits in its own little tab. What we heard from researchers and librarians is they really want to still be able to go back and forth. And let's just type in a search and see what we get back. One of the things I really like about Scopus AI is the transparency we've built in. So you can see here that it's sort of telling you what it's doing as it's crunching through these steps. And it's creating a Boolean search on the fly, you can see that it's, since I put in college students, like there's all kinds of different ways to talk about college students. So it's also putting in the synonyms of like university, higher ed, etc.
Emily, sorry to interrupt. I think people are still seeing your slides and not the prompt.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Let me see if I can. All right. All right, are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Oh, yay. Okay. Sorry about that. Here I am talking. You're like, oh, I don't say anything. Yeah. So right. So these are the co-pilot steps where it shows you how it's kind of performing the natural language search, but it's also generating that Boolean on the fly to really enrich your search. And then you've got the summary, really importantly, and this is similar to what you just saw in Web of Science, really showing where this information came from. So pointing back to the references also show up in the sidebar over here, and you can click right out to the paper. So really trying to ground it directly in the research in the scholarship. And then there's you can do an expanded summary. We heard that from researchers. You can go into a concept map to kind of get that visual of what it looks like in terms of different areas. And then down here, these are two of my favorite features, the emerging themes that I talked about, and also who are the experts in this field? Can you kind of take us through that citation map and show us, who's publishing a lot in this area and get right to the experts. So I think that's all I really wanted to show. And just taking a while to come up there. But I think I'm pretty much right at my time, so I will stop sharing and go on to the next person. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Emily. And Ashank, last but not least.
Hey, thanks, thanks, Kathleen. Hey, I'm Ashank Rai. I'm the product manager here at JSTOR, and also joining me is Beth LaPensee. She's the principal product manager. So yeah, I'm keen to show off what we have developed on our platform in terms of a Gen AI solution, which we believe is really useful for researchers. Before we jump in, just some sort of like anchoring thoughts here. The way we approached our sort of building of our product is really keeping, the item or the document at the center of everything that's happening around the research tool, as well as making sure there's traceability and trying to encourage, AI literacy as people use the tool itself, right? And so everything you're seeing here, we're hoping is building towards that. And it's some of the feedback we've heard from faculty and publishers, et cetera, is like, yeah, this seems to be headed in that direction where we're helping bring the community along as researchers are engaging with the tool. So now let me just, start actually showing things off rather than talking. Cool. So here we are on the JSTOR website. In order to access the tool, the user has to be logged into their account, which you can go here and log in, and then they have to be authenticated via their institution. So then they can go and perform a search. Something that's been top of mind for me recently is all this talk about asteroids and one which is apparently going to maybe hit the Earth. I don't know. But anyway, that's been top of mind. So I'm just going to enter the search term asteroid in here. And then this acts pretty much like the typical JSTOR search, right? It pulls up all the pertinent search results to an asteroid. But then when you click into any journal article, book, chapter, document, that's when we start, you get to what we call the item page, and that's when you see the tool sort of showing itself off, right? And starts off by taking your search query and saying, okay, how does it relate to this document, right? So again, putting the document itself at the center of the researcher space, and also making sure by doing so that when, other people have spoken about RAG and all those other things, that's similar what's happening here. And we've tried to double down on that by making sure that the LLM that's, fueling our product is actually deriving all its insights from within the document itself, right? So it's not pulling from anything, around the web. It's actually looking at the document and just addressing whatever is in there. And then to that point, as it's going about answering the question, we're also like really highlighting, we call this inline citations. So it's really pulling in like where in the document it's pulling up that answer from, right? And then we've got some other features we've thrown in there, such as, if you want, you can go ahead and summarize the document. In cases where we actually have the abstracts available, this summarize button gets replaced by the abstract, and we actually show off the abstract rather than the summarization itself, right? And so that way, again, we want to make sure whatever is the authoritative voice of the author, that's being shown off here rather, and we make that the focus of the attention. Other features we have is showing related content. So again, once you click in there, we look into our corpus and then pull up other things that could be related to the topic on hand, as well as recommended topics. So similar to what other people have spoken about, just assessing sort of the intent behind the document, trying to see what other things, the researcher can then turn their attention to that can keep them, in that researcher flow, so to speak. We've also put in this nice nifty little button here where the researcher can dismiss the research tool in case they don't want it. So that way, then they just focus on the document itself. And finally, the one last thing I will show off here is we do have this thing which we call semantic search, but it's another way of saying natural language search. And so suppose I were to say asteroid and dinosaurs, right? So you have, again, the regular JSTOR searcher, which does keyword search. But then we've got this semantic search, which now tries to understand the intent behind the query that I'm trying to run, and then pulls up the more, what it thinks is the most relevant hits to this natural language search that I'm trying to run. So yeah, that pretty much concludes all the high level points that we've, incorporated into this product. And I will stop sharing here.
Thank you, Ashank. Right on time. And thank you, everyone. Those were great presentations. I'm going to pull up my slides again so that everyone can see the questions. So our first question is, what do you consider the most important advantages of using generative AI within information products? And Denice, do you want to go first?
Of course. I think one good advantage would be the ability to extract information from a variety of documents at a single point in time, as well as to be able to summarize that information. And there's sometimes that generative AI can be used to find insights within documents as well.
Thank you. Anne, would you like to go next?
Sure. I would just add to that, I think the time savings that, it can provide to people who are already very strapped for time, like researchers, is significant, and I think anything that can streamline their tasks, automate things that can be automated, right, and free up their time for the more complex things, is welcome. I think that, the local language capabilities, I touched on that very briefly, is also huge because, being able to more easily interact with data in your native language, and get responses in your native language is also, another big advantage.
Absolutely. Emily, would you like to go next?
Sure, yeah, and +1 to everything Denice and Anne just said. I think there's a lot of advantages to this technology. I would just add to that, what we're hearing from users and researchers is they are looking for kind of that place that has all the whistles and bells of ChatGPT, but it's not that generic web answer machine. And they know with these RAG-based tools that they're really grounded in the literature, that they're seeing results that are, based on your more traditional search of a scholarly database. So I think that's why we see people turning to these tools more and more. And I would also add, accessibility, the language functionality that Anne pointed out is really important. And, we're starting to think about ways to have more options to, kind of science communication use cases of these tools. So you know how with these large language models, they can explain things to you in less scientific jargon or vocabulary, right? So there's opportunity there for sort of a more educational tool. So I think there's a lot of really interesting ways that we can use these tools. So I guess that's where I would add to that.
Yeah, that's a good point about explaining things in terms for laymen. And Ashank,
Yeah,
would you like to go next?
so when we've been thinking about talking to researchers, what we've really indexed on is the fact that some of the most laborious process in this, the researcher flow is getting to the most relevant, documents or items that you need for your research, right? So the way we've thought about this is when we put this on our platform is how can we quicken that process? So Anne spoke about, how do you make the, more the rote task, so to speak, quicker and get the researcher to the more creative aspects, right? And get to, making, creating their paper or getting to their assignment, what have you, right? Whichever stage of researcher they are. So in that sense, that's where we really believe that's the advantages of a Gen AI tool is really thinking about like, this thing, what can it do for me to accelerate my process, right? So I can get to the more meatier parts of the creative process that is where we excel and shine as humans. So we've really tried to, index on that and try and make that, our core focus on, and we like to call it like focus on, rather than providing the end product, focus on the process, right? And that's where we really feel that's where the AI tools really help the researcher out.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all of those insights here. The next question, though, is the opposite. So in contrast, what are the drawbacks of using generative AI within information products? And Anne, would you like to go first this time?
Sure. I'm sure everyone has heard, many things about, bias, hallucinations. I mean, we can create a list, privacy, intellectual property, security, lots of concerns, lots of concerns. And I think, what you're hearing from us and, what you'll hear throughout the panel, I think all of us are well aware of those, right? And I think the legal and regulatory environment around this is rapidly evolving, around the world in different ways. So we're all on the journey of seeing how it advances. It's happening very quickly. But I want everyone else to comment. I'll give that broad view that we all need to be very aware of these limitations too, right? We can't assume that everything is perfect, and it's our responsibility to continue to work on that.
Thank you. Emily, would you like to go next?
Sure, yeah. And thank you, Anne. That's right. We could talk all day about all those different issues. Yeah. And I think one of the things that's important to note with all of our approaches is that by using a kind of firewalled instance of an LLM that's hosted on a private server, we're sort of a little bit protected from some of the concerns that we have about that kind of generic open web LLM. So like the queries and the searches are not being fed back into the LLM. One thing I want to bring up that's sort of a smaller thing, but we do hear this in user testing and with folks we're working with on these tools is reproducibility, right? So I've just gotten this great summary, I've gotten this great analysis and so forth and so on, but what can I do with that? And I think that's another thing that we're all sort of struggling with as a community. How do you cite this? How do you, if someone were to run this same query, 6 months from now, would they get the same response? And we're struggling. We get that as one of the biggest kind of feedback from our users, but it's also hard to solve for because of the privacy. We're trying to keep this kind of very private, very firewalled. We don't store your search. We don't share your search. And so I don't know, there might be some sort of compromise here. Like you don't have to log in to use Scopus AI, but maybe if you maybe for logged in users, we could share your searches in your account or so. We're sort of struggling with that balance of like privacy versus people who are like, we really want to be able to go back and see shared history, all those things that you can do with like traditional search. So that's just one kind of minor thing, but we do hear it a lot from users.
Yeah, that's a good point. Ashank, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest drawbacks or concerns we're hearing is that loss of critical thinking, right? From researchers, from users of these tools, right? In fact, in the chat, I see somebody asked about summaries around multiple documents, which Beth responded, no, we don't support that. And that was again, a very intentional reason, right? And again, going back to that idea of process versus the end product, right? We don't want users relying on a summary or what have you as, and pulling that out and then taking them completely away from, what they're supposed to be doing, which is the researcher activity, right? And so I think really and that is a continuous balance for us, like, in as some of the others have said, in the product development process, right? Like, how do we keep making sure we're trying to see how we can, give more value to users at every single moment, but there is a fine line where you cross over and then you're giving too much away, right? And so that is, I think, the biggest, drawback, that you don't want to take that away from the user, where you expect them to really interact and engage with the content. And so that, I would say, is what is always top of mind for us.
Right. Thank you. Denice.
Ditto to what all of my fellow panelists have said before. The only drawback that I see is either in addition to what has already been said, is for people to, end users to think that it's the final solution, or to use the wrong tool for the wrong purpose. So I think the more that we can familiarize anyone using any of the products and tools on what they truly should be used for, as well as what they should not, definitely is helpful.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So our next question is, what is the corpus of content that your tool works with? What strategies do AI developers and librarians use to assess and ensure the accuracy of AI-generated responses? And how can librarians help identify and address misinformation or hallucinations? So let's start with Emily this time.
Sure thing. Great question. So with the corpus of content varies from tool to tool. With Scopus AI looks at Scopus content. Right now, it's only looking back 10 years of Scopus content. And Clinical Key AI looks at a subset of clinical key content that's more medical clinical databases and resources. And our Science Direct will look at Science Direct. And so it's the same. I always tell people it's the same old database you know and love. It's not any new content. It might be a subset of that content, but it is not Reddit or, like the open web or anything like that. It really is doing that RAG-based search of the same content that you would do in a traditional search environment. In terms of strategies that we use for accuracy, we do a tremendous amount of human vetting and human in the loop in our development. And we're constantly looking at, testing, running test queries and looking at what it's doing and tweaking our prompt engineering to make sure that it really is good. Doing RAG really does minimize hallucinations quite a lot, but we still want to make sure we're always doing that kind of quality control. And in terms of kind of how librarians and users can help us, we have lots of feedback options within our tools, and in particularly within these new AI tools of kind of give us feedback, give us a thumbs up, give us a thumbs down, send us a comment, send us feedback. And I have seen where that feedback goes. I mean, it literally goes straight to the product developers, like they have it right there on their phones. They're seeing it in real time. So it's really helpful to us to get that kind of feedback, and we're constantly responding to it.
That's great to hear. Thank you. Let's see. Ashank, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, in terms of the corpus itself, so our AI tool currently looks at all text-based content, a secondary source, so your journals, articles, books that are within the JSTOR corpus. So that and we do our trying to think through how we can expand on that in the future. In terms of the tactics employed, I would say a lot of overlap with what Emily, put forward as well in terms of making sure that there are ways within the tool itself that users can provide feedback, but at the same time, within the development teams as well, we're making sure that we're constantly assessing. We've got this thing called what we call like the goal data set, right? And what we do there is this is essentially a data set which has been generated using humans who have like gone through, pulled up random samples, given their own point of view on what the correct answer, accurate answer should be. And we use this as a reference. So anytime a query is asked or whatever that is, we'll look at the response and then we'll compare it to the ground truth, right? And we'll see, hey, how much overlap is there? How is it working? How is it not working? And then based on that, we will tweak the prompts to make it better, right? So that each time, we're constantly, improving over those prompts that go out into the system. And then we also try and see how we can use, as we like to call it, the system against itself, right? So we will also ask, the LLMs like, hey, if, uh, check this for bias and what have you. How do you think we're doing, right, in terms of the answers we're providing? And and then that gives us also a scale of like what's happening here, right? And then with this rating, we can then assess like whether we need to improve, do further improvements, or what have you. And finally, I would also say here, like again, placing the focus on the document itself on hand by placing it on the item page. Typically, we see bias, not much bias from the tool itself, but if there's bias within the document, that's what gets reflected in the answers, right? And so, if the authorship itself is showing bias or some sort of, a prejudice or whatever, that's what gets reflected in the answer itself. And so it's always that maintaining a sort of balance of, okay, I can see where the user's coming from when they're complaining about, that there's bias here and stuff like that, but also knowing that, yeah, that is coming from the document itself. And so how do we explore ways to, shine the light on that so that the user knows where that bias is coming from.
Oh, that's interesting. Denice, would you like to go next?
So speaking from the librarian perspective, so I think librarians typically assess the responses based off of what we've always done in terms of critically evaluating information, as well as looking to see if we can trace it back to its sources. How we can identify and address misinformation or hallucinations. I think that's where we work more with our students, our faculty, as well as the researchers at a particular college, university, or community, to ensure that they understand where you're getting this citation from, and can you yourself trace that citation back to the source. But the one thing I would hope for any tool is that when you're pulling from a corpus, that if there are any articles that have been retracted or have any errata associated with it, that those articles are pulled from the corpus. So the generative AI tool isn't pulling from those. But also, we as individuals need to understand that there's certain research that's framed in a particular time period. So we have to understand that that research from that time period reflects the thoughts from that moment in time. And that, as Ashank said before, if the bias is already in the research, then it will be reflected in the answer.
Yeah, and that's a good point about retracted articles. Anne, would you like to go next?
So many good points that I don't want to repeat, but I will say the corpus. So for us at Clarivate, it depends on the product, right? We have different things. So I showed you Web of Science Research Assistant, and that uses all the content in the Web of Science core collection at the moment. So that's conferences, books, and journals going back to 1900, sciences, social sciences, arts and humanities, global. very complete in its metadata capture, all these characteristics of Web of Science we could talk about. But I think, the key there is the Web of Science core collection has always been known for its selectivity. We have criteria we use to select the content that goes into it. So, it's high quality and trustworthy. And, with research integrity issues that are everywhere we hear about, we know that that's super important to make sure that, you're not using, especially even speaking of AI, everyone's concerned about just like crazy papers being made up by AI. And, if you're vetting the journals, you're cutting down on that tremendously, right? So I would definitely say, librarians, you understand this, trying to emphasize that if someone's going to go use like an open tool that's just pulling stuff from everywhere, you don't know the quality of it. It also might have these hallucinations, which is even scarier. At least if you're using a controlled environment, you know what you're getting, the parameters around what you're getting, and things aren't going to be completely made up. They can't be fabricated, first of all, but also it's higher quality content. And as far as misinformation, et cetera, I mean, we have feedback mechanisms as well, like a thumbs up, thumbs down. I don't know if you saw that in the quick demo, but, we're definitely getting input from users constantly, at least in the Web of Science one. But I didn't mention, our other products. So, we have like the Primo Research Assistant that would be based on whatever content someone has in their Primo Discovery service, with some limitations based on, publisher requirements and things like that. We have a ProQuest Research Assistant. So again, based on, we're not a publisher, right? So, we have partners that we get content from. So it would depend on, even on an article by article basis, what is allowed to be included. So it really, I know that complicates things, but it does depend on which resource of the portfolio you're talking about. But I think it's very, very important to know the scope and understand that, and help your users understand too, what is being searched when they're using one of these tools.
Great. Thank you. And I think we kind of touched on this question here, but if you have any other thoughts here on what do you think librarians should do to prepare themselves for the future? So Denice, would you like to go first?
As a librarian, I can say this will be, my recommendation. AI is changing so tremendously fast. So the one recommendation I would make is to make sure that as a librarian that you have a way of keeping up with what's going on, be it following an individual on various social media platforms, subscribing to a particular newsletter or blog, or even within certain newspaper subscriptions. There may be like a technology section that you can subscribe to, or even experimenting with the tools yourself, actually clearly setting aside time each week to make sure that you're getting fingers on the tool and seeing how it works. Because there are tools where the interface may change week to week. Like I'm teaching integrating AI into your research process, and the perplexity focus, the selections changed within the week. So the best way is to educate yourself on what AI tools can do, the differences between generative AI and AI as a whole, and then setting aside that time to make sure that you're reading, experimenting, et cetera, each week, to not be left.
Nope. Thank you. Ashank, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think Denice is probably in the best position to answer that question. So yeah, I'll defer to her. I think there are some great things, nuggets of wisdom there.
Anne or Emily, would you like to add anything?
I would just say it is overwhelming, and I think that's okay. We're all a bit overwhelmed, and things are happening extremely fast. When you look at just the numbers related to the LLMs and the investment going on and what's happening out there, But, it doesn't mean we should shy away from it, and I think the library community has always embraced, new technologies. I think it's very important, right? I mean, this is what users, they're using these things, right? So I think it's better to embrace it, to get on the journey that we're all on. No one knows everything, and rely on your professional organizations. I think, ACRL, ALA, the conferences where you can learn from your peers, learn from the vendors. I think that's what they're there for, and I think, we're all gonna learn together.
Yeah, I would just add to what everyone else has said, agree with all of that. And I think getting your hands on some tools and playing with them, I think Denice said, setting aside some time, just start using these. And a shout out to Ithaka SNR has a great list. It's like a Google Doc that they're maintaining of like all of these scholarly tools that are coming out, some of which are free or they have free versions. So you can just start getting in and play with them. I'll also just a shout out to my own organization has a free AI course that's available right now on Library Connect Academy. And it just is a good overview and it's on Canvas. So it's kind of like a teach yourself on a web-based platform. It's generative AI literacy for librarians. And it's a really great, I had the opportunity of contributing a little bit of content to that course. And I think it's a really good learning opportunity.
Great, thank you. Next question is, how do AI research tools impact the way students and researchers seek information? Are they changing traditional search behavior, and how should librarians adapt? Ashank, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think so. Previously, like and when I say previously, this is the state before AI and AI tools, Gen AI, and all this, right? You had a researcher, having to come to JSTOR, for example, and having to do a keyword search, right? Or if they were more adventurous and more seasoned, then they're playing around with our advanced search and throwing Boolean queries and stuff like that, right? Now, from a very human perspective, that's a learned behavior. That's not natural, right? And that's essentially what we're seeing, the change that we're seeing here, right? Like as users in general use these tools, but specifically researchers now they can start expressing themselves in very natural language and then get a response to that, right? And so it's in a way, it's now, instead of the user having to change their thinking to meet the technology now is meeting the user where the user is at, right? And I think that's the biggest evolution we're seeing here, and we're all trying to respond to that, because that in general, that is like, again, I come from a very comp sci background, but human computer interaction is about how do you make it feel the most natural to the end user, right? And that's what we're seeing here, is that search is changing, that the way people can get to content, these tools are allowing us to do it in a more natural way, in more in line with their thinking, and then they're thinking out loud, so to speak, and then changing their queries on the fly. So it's all been so interesting to see how that's happening. And I think in terms of how do people respond to this, it's like, yeah, how do librarians, faculty, etc., how do they start engaging their students to start, have them start asking questions in this manner, which gets them, refines their thinking process, right? And then gets them to that piece of content that's most relevant to their needs. I think that's sort of what we need to start thinking about, and how we need to change our sort of interactions with these technologies at large, and changing our whole mental model in these interactions.
Great, thank you. Anne, would you like to go next?
Sure. In terms of what we've seen, maybe in our products, which is how I kind of looked at that question, I think it's still kind of early days to see how user behavior is changing. These tools haven't been out that long. The Web of Science Research Assistant has been out about 6 months now broadly. The other ones are even, newer. So we're seeing that there's a mix, right? When people have the options to do the traditional search and the natural language search, it's not like everyone's using one or the other. There's a mix, and I think for different use cases, people want to do different things. But I do think that just personally, right? I mean, everything we use now is moving in this direction. Anything you go to has the chatbots. I think it's just going to be the expected behavior, that everyone uses, or maybe not, but it just seems like everything's moving that direction. So I think we'll see people kind of gravitate to it as just the way that they want to interact with things. But it'll be interesting. I think we have to, wait and see over time how people naturally kind of adopt, the tools that they have at their disposal.
Great. Thank you. Emily, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I'm enjoying this conversation. Some really good comments. And I think one of the things we're seeing is that these tools do a better job at behaviors that we have always seen from students and researchers. So to Anne's point about natural language, I was a technology librarian for many years, so I would always get the user log query reports, every month of like, what are users searching for? And they would always ask, like, how long is the library open? Like we've all seen students type these things into our search boxes, right? And so what these tools can do with that kind of natural language analysis is they can take that and actually turn it into a Boolean search and turn it into a more robust search of the database. So I think it's, it's really helping people to get to the information they need to get to easier and better. But another behavior we see a lot, which has surprised me, but also sort of I find very hopeful, is it's not necessarily replacing the traditional deep level searching, the Boolean searching that people want to do. We in Scopus AI, where we have the two search interfaces side by side, we literally see people going back and forth. And some of these are trained, searchers, researchers who've been doing this for years, using these databases for years. They will go back and forth and say, okay, I did it this way, now I want to do it this way. And there's some things I like doing over here, and there's some things I like doing over here. So I can't remember who said it, but might have been Ashank or Denice, but it's about finding the right tool for the right situation. And I think we will continue to see that.
That's a good point. And Denice, would you like to wrap up this question?
Mm-hmm. So I hate to answer a question with a question, but is it? Are the different AI research tools really changing students and researchers' information-seeking behaviors? And I'll give a couple examples. So remember teaching, integrating AI into your research process. I have students ranging from freshmen to seniors. It is interesting to me in that most of the students have not used an AI tool. Even when students said they use ChatGPT for email. Granted. Even did, here at Wake, we had peer-to-peer sessions where different faculty taught other faculty how they were using AI tools. So I did one peer-to-peer research session on integrating AI into research and instruction. And one of the professors there said, Denice, I see what you've shown me, but I can still find this information. I can still find this information using the same databases that I've used before. So if you have that faculty member that's used to a particular research workflow, if it doesn't take any time off of their current process, they're not going to move to utilizing an AI tool. Then you may have that faculty member who wants to explore what's out there, what's a new tool, can I play with it? So I have a physics faculty member that if I come into contact with a new AI tool, I'll send it to them and say, hey, what do you think? So one of the things that we have to realize is that not every individual is computer literate. Even the digital natives, AKA the students that we see on our college campuses on an everyday basis. So as librarians, I think we have to be very sensitive to the needs of the individuals that we're teaching. Are they open to learning a new tool? What are they used to developing a search string? What tool will be best for their particular research? So it's really customizing the solution depending on who's sitting in front of you. And even I was involved with a couple other librarians here in the Triad area, and we did a survey just to look at academic librarians' perceptions on AI. And we were really shocked to see how many colleges and universities, libraries didn't necessarily have an AI policy. And even the librarians themselves swayed from total Luddites, no, I don't want to use AI, to gung-ho. So right now, it feels painful because it's still in that period of evolution. So it's really a matter of going back to what I said before, what tool works best and what scenario. But the traditional search behavior still exists with a lot of our faculty, and I can't say our older faculty because that doesn't, yeah, it's nothing to do with age. It's really more to do with computer literacy and just, flexibility in terms of wanting to learn something new.
Well, thank you. Those were all great points, and we wanted to give enough time for audience questions. So let's end our main discussion with this question. What improvements to your AI tools are coming within the next year, and what are your longer term plans? And let's start with Anne.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, so we're very excited because, what we're working on, and as I told you, we have this whole platform underpinning all of our academic and government solutions is agentic AI. So, I'm not a super technical expert on any of this, so just beware. But, from what I'm learning, as you all are learning, this next wave is this agentic AI. So, what this does in a nutshell is, more complex tasks than what, we've been doing. With the Gen AI, it can pull information from different tools, from different places. It could plan. You ask it a question, it plans out its sort of plan of attack. Like, it's more human, which I know, people are saying in the chat that some of this is scary. I mean, it is scary, but if used in the proper way, it could be very useful because it could, do more iterative tasks and just advance things tremendously, right? So we've kind of jumped in on that pretty full on. And the first place we're going to deploy that is in the Web of Science Research Assistant. So in the next couple months, you will see that in the context of literature reviews, this, more sort of back and forth process. I just actually saw it today in its prototype, and it is pretty incredible how it works. So I think, that's what you'll see from us, amongst other things. But I think, if you haven't, there's some cool videos out there. I'll put one in the chat that, explains this agentic AI and kind of how it's different.
Oh, well, thank you. I hadn't heard of that. Emily.
Sure, yeah. I think probably the biggest thing on our radar right now is pushing this out for our Science Direct full text database. I'm very excited about this. You probably all know Science Direct. What you may not know is Science Direct is not just Elsevier content. So we have partnerships with many other publishers who also host their content on Science Direct. So we're looking forward to kind of what's possible with full text, having sort of a reading assistant similar to what you saw in the JSTOR document interaction. And also thinking about how we can sort of surface information that's deep within full text papers. One of the kind of use cases that we like to think about is, these are, science papers for the most part. So like scientists who are, maybe having a problem with their experiment and they want to look at other folks who have done similar experiments. That kind of information, the information about what protocol did you use in your experiment, is often not in the keywords, it's not in the metadata, it's not in the title. So it's something that the AI tool can sort of find and bring back contextually in the literature. So lots of cool ideas around that we've been working on.
Interesting. Thank you. Ashank.
Yeah. So some of the things we're exploring, as I mentioned, going back to, focusing on the process versus the end product, is, incorporating, being able to download the AI conversations themselves, which then, undergrad student or can present to the faculty, or their teacher to show how their conversation with the tool has evolved. Again, it's almost like, you're assessing them on how their critical thought is shaping up as they're interacting with the tool, right? So those are some of the things we're thinking more about how we can surface those for faculty. The other one is being able to cite the responses from the tool as well, while making sure that, again, there's traceability, that the document is at hand is the one that's being accurately cited. So again, making sure that if a researcher or student is grabbing an AI response, that their attribution is, on point, so that then whatever assignment they submit is really pointing back towards how are they getting to this nugget of information, right? Then besides that, a little more longer term, some of the things we're thinking about is how we incorporate more of a primary source material into our research tool, right? Right now, we've primarily focused on journals, articles, books, but we do have our corpus is we're continuously adding more primary source material in there. So the question is now, within that research tool, how can we bring that to the fore so that we're getting more of the researchers to those pieces of content, right? And again, making sure the most relevant one makes it to the researchers' needs. So those are some of the things we are thinking about. And we're always, we're also, in general, probably I would finish off by saying, trying to see how we can make the tool better, nudging the user to continue with that researcher flow, right? So it's, again, not ending with grabbing an answer from the tool itself, but how can we nudge them to do one more thing, take one more step? And so those are explorations we'll continue to do along with our users, and see, like, how and working with librarians, faculty, like, how can we nudge users to keep in that research cycle, rather than believing that using the research tool is going to be the end of that.
Thank you. Denice, is there anything you'd like to add?
Nope. I think this question is more for everyone
fine.
but me. It's okay.
So thank you, everyone. That was a great conversation. And I think I've been seeing the chat go wild on my other screen here. So Eric, let me stop sharing here.
Right on. Yeah, we do have a lot of questions, and I know we've got about 13 minutes left, but there's one that's been getting a lot of traction, a lot of plus ones, a lot of upvotes, if you will. And it's been reposted a couple of times. So I'm going to throw it out there. And so it's essentially, how do the panelists reconcile using GPT models as the foundation for their tools with the AI ethics and responsibility principles? And they're not focusing so much on the closed systems to protect user privacy, but they're referring to kind of the ethical, labor, and environmental concerns involved in the creation and use of GPT models. Who wants to jump on that one first?
I can jump into that. It is something that we think about a tremendous amount at Elsevier. So we're a 2030 company. We're trying to be a zero carbon by 2030. Microsoft, by the way, has also signed that commitment. So good luck to them. So that's why we try and minimize the use of the LLM. And there's a lot that you can do with small language models, particularly when you are restricted to that corpus of, we're not talking about like, we're talking about answering scholarly questions based on scholarly search, right? We're not like trying to answer every question that anyone can type into Google. So you can have these sort of smaller domain-specific models that do a lot of the heavy lifting. And that's another reason why like we try and sort of minimize sort of some of those traditional search features, like run my search again, let me tweak my search, let me run it again, because we don't want to hit the large language model a million times if we don't have to, right? So we're thinking about how to do that, but these are things that we struggle with. And one of the things that I find hopeful, just speaking like as a person, is we're starting to see competition in this space. We're starting to see tremendous amount of investment in this space from the academy, for example. So it would be great if we did not have to rely just on the Silicon Valley models and had more kind of human-centered AI starting to come forward. It does require a tremendous amount of investment, but like, for example, the Empire AI coming out of SUNY, the huge investments we've seen at like Michigan or Harvard or Yale are, again, still small potatoes, but I think maybe we'll start to see that grow.
Awesome, thanks. Does anybody else? Anne, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important question. Everyone's been upvoting it. So yeah, I think it's good that we address it, and we're all thinking about it, right? And it's an industry, especially the environmental part, is an industry-wide challenge, you know. So, you know, we have similar commitments to net zero emissions. You know, we have an environmental statement we could send. You know, we do care about it, and you know, we are working with our cloud storage partners like Amazon and Microsoft, you know, because of course, you know, we can try to encourage them, but you know, a lot of it does rely on them if we continue to work with them. But what we can do is, you know, in our internal processes and the way we do things, try to make them efficient. So, you know, that's been the way that we've tried to contain, you know, the cost with, you know, reducing redundancies and, you know, a lot of the technical ways that we can, you know, make, you know, the process of how we do our AI more efficient and deploy it in a smart way to cut down, you know, on that load. So I think, you know, we're all, and we're definitely open to ideas, you know, if you guys have interesting ideas, you know, we're always we have advisory boards, we have partners, you know, we have many ways. I mean, or just contact us, you know, we want to know the best approaches to this. On the labor side, I know someone brought up ethical labor. That I'm not as familiar with. I have not heard that being discussed as much, to be honest. You know, it's usually the environmental concerns. So I would say, you know, please do, and I'm sure my colleagues have, you know, I just have not. So please, you know, bring specifics to us. And I think it's definitely something that we should dig into.
Yeah, and I'll just add that it's like we've been dealing with this for 2 years now. We've been deep in these developments, and it really is still in its infancy. And we've heard about competitors and better solutions. Someone in the chat just mentioned DeepSeek, and it's like the competition there is driving costs down. I don't actually know if there is a similar environmental impact with that product, but I believe what we're going to start seeing as this really takes off, and we're seeing value in delivering what users need and getting a swell behind the capabilities, what we can do with this, that pressure will be there. It will mount, and we'll be able to make changes, long-term changes for good as this really takes root. I think it's a process that we all need to work through together.
Yeah, and probably what I'll add to what Beth said is like the way I suspect is the same with Emily and Anne. The way we build the tools it's LLM agnostic, so we can swap these out like when we need to, right? So as soon as we see like an option out there that's, you know, providing value to our, you know, users, but at the same time it's hitting on all these concerns we're talking about, you know, we can swap them out pretty easily, right? So it's a little bit of this is a wait and watch to see like how these underlying technologies can evolve as well, and you know, hopefully get us to a better place where we're all feeling comfortable with it.
Great. I'm going to take this. I'm going to synthesize a couple of questions that have kind of touched on the same theme. And that theme is best practices. And I think I'll ask this to Denice first. One is regarding what is the best practice of, from an instructional librarian standpoint, of teaching, you know, our traditional database searching methods versus using AI. And then the broader question is, what is the best practice of reporting how we use AI assistance in our published research and what we put out there?
I think best practice would be, especially as an instruction librarian, if you're doing a one-shot for a faculty member for a particular course, best practice would be to consult with that faculty member to see, you basically give them options, explaining how you could show the students how to demonstrate using XYZ databases, or there are these other AI tools, and to see what they really want. Do they want the traditional versus AI or hybrid combination? In terms of if you're an instructional librarian and you're teaching your own course, that goes, best practice would be to follow your particular university or college's viewpoint on AI. Remember way back when ChatGPT first came out, there was one university that banned the use of ChatGPT on the campus. So I think it would be your best interest to say, you know, is there any guidelines with regards from the university, from your Center for Academic, you know, for Center for the Advancement of Teaching, or similar organization before developing a particular course. So if you're on a campus where it's academic freedom, teach what you want, assess what's the technical capabilities of most of the students. And a lot of times, even best practice would do a survey for the students as well as the faculty to see what their needs are. So I come from the standpoint of, my belief has always been, you know, to teach the individuals in front of me. So even if I was teaching the same course semester after semester, it'll change depending on the students that are in the class. So that's the same advice I think I would give to any instructional librarian.
And then for our other panelists, do you have any recommendations on best practices for how to report this when we're, you know, using the AI tools and then doing published research or putting it out there?
I can start that, just because Elsevier is a big publisher, and I would say that it's very discipline specific, and most publishers now have policies that are, you know, really in detail, say how to use AI to cite it, how to indicate whether or not you used it in your research, etc. I always give the example, if you're like a poetry magazine, probably really important whether you used it to create your poem, right? But if you're doing bench research in a laboratory and English is not your first language, and you're publishing with Elsevier, the fact that you used it to help with your writing, and as long as you acknowledge that, we're okay with that, right? Because that's an accessibility issue. We want to make sure that people who need it can have help with their writing, or even if you don't need it, whatever, just acknowledge it, be transparent, say how you used it. So it really runs the gamut by discipline in terms of what's allowable, what's not allowable. And I think just checking with the policies before you publish with any publisher. And like I said, most have something up there by now to say exactly how and when it can be used, whether in the research process itself or in the publication, you know, the writing of your paper.
Great, thanks. We've got 2 minutes left. I think we have time for one more question. And this is kind of about, it's looking at that your tools are all very good in the sense that they are specific to your own products, right? So they're siloed in a sense. But the horizon is when researchers are using their own individual AI assistants, In the future, how are your companies thinking about having your agents and your models interacting with the researchers' models for a much more robust research experience?
Well, maybe I'll just chime in since I brought up the agentic AI. And again, I'm still learning about this, but I think that that type of model is how we can get to that, right? Because I think the idea is there's like multiple agents can interact. So I know it sounds a little crazy, but if someone has their own tool, I think the idea is that, different agents can interact to solve a problem. So I think maybe we're moving in that direction. I don't think that's going to happen overnight, but yeah, it seems like that would enable that at least.
I can add to that. So I don't know how many of you have played around with Deep Research, which is DeepMind's agentic research platform, right? Where you can say, go out and research this topic. And the way these tools are working now is, it'll start to do some web activity on your behalf. But when it hits a platform, like if it were to hit our platform, you would have to provide it with, your credentials, right? Like it's subscription content. And so you'd have to be like, okay, I'm affiliated with this university. Can you now run this search and search Science Direct on my behalf and so forth and so on. So I think, we're not in any kind of partnership with Deep Research. We're aware of it. We're looking at it. But I think that's the next horizon, as Anne points out, where we will probably have agents that work on our behalf, and they will need to have access to the things we do as a student on our campus, to our Canvas course, to our library management system, to our whatever, my Travelocity account when I'm booking tickets. And I think that's sort of the next horizon of what the web might look like in a few years. And I honestly have no idea what that's going to mean, but I think that's probably what we're looking at, is that you as a human will need to give permissions to say, yes, you can go into my this account or my that account. I mean, who knows, like checking account, like, I don't know, it's a little scary, but maybe.
I'll just throw in really quick. This kind of use of agents is very counter to the way JSTOR has been building our AI product. Like we've been very deliberate in ensuring that the user is still in the driver's seat and making the choices and deciding what to do, and that the AI is there to support them and to strengthen their work. And so it's like the thing that I'm thinking most about the agentic approach is that I think have a responsibility to leverage this technology. It is making new things possible, but how do we do it in a way that really does ensure that the students can develop their research skills and really learn and develop their critical thinking and their point of view. We don't want the machines doing that for them. Otherwise, they don't need to go to school. So it's like there is a lot of things that are possible. We may use them in certain circumstances, but we may need to find ways to control and shape what we deliver with that technology going forward. So.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Would anyone like to add anything else, or? Nope.
This has been fun.
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank
we're a
you.
little bit over time, but I think this was really informative. And thanks again to our panelists for sharing their time and their tools with us. And we appreciate everyone who attended today. So as Eric put in the chat, the recording will be uploaded to the ACRL STS YouTube channel. And we've shared the great links that are in chat to share with attendees as well. So I expect that soon in the future. And thanks for joining us, especially since this went on a little bit longer than your typical hour session. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.